Hello and good evening, everyone. As always, it's Monday, so we are back with a whole new week of cricket action on Beyond the Boundary. You're watching TUI Sports. A new week starts, so a lot of chatter around cricket and world cricket. It's not just about Indian cricket. And in that regard, we have brought a very special show for you, something that we have been developing over the last couple of weeks, and it is related to the growing space or the shrinking space, in fact, of the international cricket calendar with so many T20 leagues propping up in almost every country. So we're going to talk about where is cricket headed in terms of so many leagues propping up, what impact it has on player availability, what impact it has in terms of players earning, players hopping from one league to another. Are they now mercenary cricketers? And also, how are these leagues governed? Are they sanctioned leagues? Are they unsanctioned leagues? Official leagues? And what is the role of ICC in this? Can the ICC even govern the league structure? And for this, we have a brilliant panel, and not just Indian voices. We have voices from across the world because we want to give you the lowdown from everyone. So let's bring on the panelists. We have some esteemed guests. First of all, K. Srinivas Rao, Group Sports Editor, Times of India. We have George Dobell, who's so popular on Twitter as well as on X, and he's also associated with the Cricketer now. Who doesn't know George Dobell? He's joining us all the way from UK. Very welcome to you, George, on Beyond the Boundary. We have the superstar of cricket podcasting, cricket content. We have Jared Kimber with us, one of the best voices on cricket that you will have. And also, welcome, Jared, on Beyond the Boundary on TOI Sport. Thanks for your time. And also, we have all the way from the US, which is, of course, such an important market for cricket now, such an important emerging market for cricket now. And he is part of our Times group from Crick Buzz, our very own Smith Patel. Smith, it's your debut on Beyond the Boundary. A very warm welcome to you as well.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be on here.
Right, guys. So let's start. Like I said, the base in terms of what the show is all about. We're going to be talking about the shrinking space of the international cricket schedule, or just in terms of how many leagues are just springing up in every part and every nook and corner of the world. And while it's something really good for broadcasters, for cricketers, for the countries that are hosting these leagues, there's always a bit of concern in terms of, is there enough for everyone, and what does it do to the international schedule, or what does it do the sport, even in terms of, is it structured enough? So let's get your initial thoughts on this. Let's start with Srinivas Rao. The shrinking space in terms of these leagues springing up all over. Srini, let's get your thoughts.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm going to kind of divide this into two or three parts. One is wherever there's consumption, game is going to move in the direction. There are no two ways about it. These leagues are sprouting, and this the white ball format is disintegrating because there is some of the other kind of consumption around the world. Where this kind of cricket is talked about. So from that standpoint, consumption alone drives the business of cricket, and no surprises there. The other bit is about having a democratic setup. So I hear a lot of commentary and narrative around these days, where people say, oh, there comes another league. There comes another T20 league or whatever. The point is, where do you put a stop to this? So do you really need to put a stop to this? Where I come from, at the end of the day, when we talk about a democratic setup, as much as it's BCCI is right, or England and Wales Cricket Board's right, to run a league of their choice and their format, it is any cricket board's right to kind of do the same. And every cricket board is well within its right to think of what kind of should benefit them in the long and short run, right? So from that standpoint, they're free to run. So where does it take us? And of course, as we go forward, we're going to talk a lot about player availability, which I think is cricket's biggest war going forward into the future. Having said that, while we've discussed the possibility that there is a democratic setup in place and everybody needs to have an equal say in that, the question is, where does this head going forward? Just to start this debate, I'm going to put this forward here. They're saying that I think the law of the jungle is going to apply going forward, where the fittest will survive in this. Anything that's not fit enough to stay in the race will have to
Okay.
perish. And that's the only
Okay.
way to determine what stays, what doesn't.
Okay, so important points here. First of all, of course, anybody can bring in the democratic thing, the new emerging markets, and the survival of the fittest, which is Charles Darwin's, obvious law when it comes to anything that revolves around humans. George, I'll bring you in here because look, what Srini alluded to, the points that he's making, that if there is a consumption, there is going to be some sort of a tournament out there. Let's take England's example. They invented the T20 format to give us something new, and then they realized over a period of time that okay, let's go and bring in another format, the 100. Let's talk about the consumption model here. Is there consumption enough for different formats? Before and I think simultaneously, along with the 100, we also saw the advent of T10 as well, in different parts of the world. We'll come to T10 as well. Uh, but do you agree with this, that as long as there's consumption, different formats will be experimented with? And should they be experimented with? Should we say, okay, does cricket need so many formats?
Hello. Well, firstly, I agree with a lot of what Shrini said there. I think that the law of the jungle is a pretty decent way of putting it. And we're in clearly a transitional phase where all the traditional structures that we had, they've fallen apart. They've proven themselves incapable of coping. But we don't know how everything's going to land yet. And there are definitely going to be some of these leagues will fail. There are too many leagues. And while we talk about consumption, I don't think we quite know what that consumption level is. Is there the consumption to support? Well, I'll give you an example. I think Z took a huge punt on the IL20, the league that's held in Dubai, or the UAE rather. I think they paid 100 million US for 10 years. I hear that the teams, the franchises are reluctant to pay their yearly fees. I've been to that competition, which makes me very unusual, I can tell you. I don't know that they're all going to survive. Whether there was the need for another format, in terms of the 100, well, I think that there wasn't, and I don't suppose it will survive. Once you're in the ground, watching the 100, it's not so different from a T20, and it does have the slight advantage of fitting into a broadcast schedule somewhat easier. I know that's not an issue in India. It's very much an issue in the UK. So there was some advantage to it, but I don't think, it was a gimmick, really. It was just trying to find a point of difference. And I think that you would expect that competition to become a traditional, if you like, T20 in the next few years. But what you're seeing, as Shrini said, is all the different boards and different broadcasters all looking for a piece of the cake. And I suspect there isn't enough cake to go around. And that once we're at where there's just wallpaper T20, I think only the best will survive.
Okay, yeah, okay. You mentioned a couple of points there in terms of how many leagues do we have. So we prepared. So in this show, we supplement our conversation with some statistics and graphics, and this is kind of the number of leagues that are going around at the moment. Of course, we have the IPL, we have the Big Bash, Caribbean Premier League, Pakistan Super League, Bangladesh Premier League, Mazansi Super League, MSL, which obviously is now the SA20, Lanka Premier League, its comeback, New Zealand Super Smash, the T20 Blast, Abu Dhabi T10. There's the IL T20, as you mentioned. There's something called the Euro T20 Slam. I didn't know about that. Afghanistan Premier League, it was defunct. They're trying to redo it. There's again the number of leagues on the right side of this. Just every nook and corner of the world. In fact, I'll tell you, there was Hong Kong Sixes, which retired cricketers. There are leagues now with retired cricketers, which are being played across the world. Jared, let's bring you in here. George talked about the consumption bit and that there is broadcast money to be had. And you know what? When the IPL started, Lalit Modi wanted something on the lines of what we have in European football. But in European football, when we talk about the pie, the broadcast pie, it's a limited pie. It's not like anybody can start a league. Every country can have two different leagues. We can have two or three different formats of the sport. It's only in cricket where we have different formats, and everybody is now springing up leagues. Why the differentiation is because in Europe it's monitored in terms of the player availability, that the player is signed up for 12 years to a particular league, and it's on a particular channel, it's on a particular broadcast. So cricket is very different in that sense. do we see that all these leagues have enough from the pie? Is there is the broadcast pie that big to support all these leagues going forward?
Not all these leagues are making money. So there's your
Yeah.
first answer.
Yeah.
The second answer would be probably more along the lines of, are they even all there to get broadcast money? I think some of these leagues exist for betting rights rather than anything else. I think some of these leagues might even exist in part for dark money to be moved around between people. I think if we actually looked at some of the finances of these leagues, which they'll never show us, of course, I think we'd be shocked at what is actually happening here. I think a lot of these leagues as well, they'll talk about their owners. And when you actually have a look around, you realize that they don't all have team owners, right? Like a lot of these leagues own the teams themselves. So it's already crumbling. It's crumbling right in front of us. Look, you've got the Global T20 Canada League there. And, that league of recent times had the players refuse to go out on the field, right? Because they weren't being paid. A couple of years later, they played a game where, depending on who you talk to, they changed the boundaries after the toss was made because there were puddles on the outfield, and they decided to play a one-over game. Because I had to get a game. I had to get a game on the field. Like, there was no one there, right? There were more people who were going to play in that game than were there to watch it. Who needed the one-over game, right? What was the reason for that to go ahead? It wasn't for TV. No one was going to quickly switch on their streaming platforms to go and watch that. So why do these leagues exist? They're already falling apart. There's no oversight. There's no governance on any of these leagues. I haven't been involved in some of the leagues like the Caribbean Premier League. They get owners in, and then the owners come in and they realize this is not the person that they should be dealing with. Sometimes these people, I've dealt with ownership groups who just lie and don't have any money. They just wanted to be involved with the franchise, and then, getting them to pay bills is almost impossible. This is completely untenable. If your main reason for your league to exist is to sell the betting rights to a gambling company, I think there's already ethical concerns there with having a cricket league. And I'm not saying that cricket league shouldn't make money off gambling because, people are gambling on them. There should be an element of that. But if your league literally only exists for gambling, I think that opens it up to far more issues without it. And then you've got, things like I think you're missing one. What was the one in the tax haven this year? So you don't even have all of the leagues on there.
Yeah, where David Warner participated, if I'm not mistaken.
But not Bermuda, whatever it was, the tax haven league, right? Yeah. Like, why does that exist? Who's going to cricket there? How many people are watching that on TV? It's a terrible time zone for most people, right? Yeah. Why does that exist? And if you go through the list of all those teams, all those leagues you had up there, and you ask the simple question of why they exist, it's not about broadcasting, right? Because half of those leagues aren't even broadcast in that many places anymore.
Right. I think it was the Cayman Islands League, if I'm not mistaken.
Cayman Islands League, my favorite league. George probably worked on that one. He's probably got some offshore accounts there, knowing him.
George, did you? Not the offshore account bit, but of course, did you make a trip over there? I know you've been hobnobbing in private jets, etc. You're on mute.
Oh, he sounds better on mute.
So true. Just as well, because I was talking rubbish. No, I don't have an offshore account in the Caymans. I didn't think you were going to ask that question. I agree again with a lot of what Jared said. I mean, the thing is, this is a snapshot in time, and this isn't what world cricket's going to look like in 10 years. It's obviously changed a lot in the last 10 years, and it will continue to change. But there probably will have to be some sort of rationalization, because all sorts of people are on the take, really, or have some aspiration to make some money from this, and then not all going to succeed. I mean, if you look at, I think we're at a tipping point now, actually, where the PSL is likely to be held at the same time as the IPL. And if you look how many competitions will happen in those first couple of months of next year, there's so many of them are going to be in competition with one another. They all compromise one another. It gets to the stage where even those of us who love the game and make a living from it can't possibly watch it all. So you wonder what the market is, really. and you wonder whether we are somewhere near saturation point. But
Okay, we'll come to this. Yeah, we'll come to this point where the leagues are, overlapping each other, and what does it make for the cricketers? But let's first of all, where we were talking about growing the game. It's not just like you said. It can't be just about making money, right? You have to grow the game. You have to go to these markets. That was where the likes of T10 and the 100 were invented. That you could grow the game there. And I want to talk about North America, Canada. We mentioned about the Canadian League. We have the MLC in the graphic. We didn't mention the MLC. We're going to rectify that. The MLC is there, but they're also the fact that the T20 World Cup went to the US and the ICC is simply underlining it that this is an emerging market. Nobody can deny that. Smith, I want to bring you here in this conversation. Nobody can deny that North America, Canada, and the US is a brilliant market. It's a brilliant market. It's a growing market, but at the same time, uh, there might not be the infra in place. When I say the infra, in terms of not just the cricket stadiums, etc., but also in terms of uh, governing the competitions, the tournaments that are springing up, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in America. And look, while we talk about the leagues overlapping each other in established countries, when we talk about the new markets, the emerging markets, the first base has to be about proper governance of whatever tournaments or whatever leagues are being started off. What are your thoughts on this topic and on the questions that I've asked?
I mean, as far as governance concerned, it's zilch here in America. It's zero.
Okay.
I like to USA cricket. It's like a dumpster on fire, basically, and it's the leagues over here are sort of. I mean, it's getting out of control. It's spiraling out of control. There are more than 7 to 8 leagues over here in the US that give away total prize money more than 200,000 without
Okay.
any recognized revenue streams, right? Those 7 to 8 leagues, and I'm not talking about major league and minor league, those 7 to 8 leagues sustain around 25 to 30 first class cricketers that have relocated over here in the US. And there are, teams, there are clubs that are giving away like 60 to $70,000 per annum to these players to just play in these 7 to 8 different leagues that are being held, around the year in the US. And I was talking to David F. Grave. He is with ICC. I forget his designation, but to put things in perspective, he told me that US, US gives him the highest number of applications for T20 leagues to be sanctioned. And yeah, he was like, I get inundated with that, with all the applications that flow from the US. I mean, it's a wild, wild west over here. There is zero governance. There is zero oversight from the apex body as well. So it's like a frantic gold rush. Uh, there are players that come over here and play on tourist visa. I mean, one O1 visa costs like what? Probably $25,000, $30,000.
Yeah.
So there's literally no oversight, and people are doing what they want over here.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's
of
it's
course.
it's a mad gold rush that I'd like to talk about. And there are a few instances which I want to bring to light. I've written about it as well. So let's talk about the NCL, right? It's called the National Cricket League. You had all these big dogs of world cricket kind of swarming around it. They give Sachin Tendulkar some equity. They give Sunil Gavaskar some equity. You had Vivian Richards flown in from the Caribbean, and so all of these big names swarming around a league where Wahab Riaz and Timal Mills were bowling left arm orthodox spin. You know, uh, it was a league where Colin Munro gets hit on his gloves a couple of times, and he, kind of flungs the bat 50 meter high up in the air to never come back after getting hit because of a dangerous pitch or something. So, and Harun Lorgat was at the helm of the tournament. And you could see that the ICC rules were openly flouted. There were more than 8 to 9 international players, 7 to 8 internationals playing in the 11, despite the ICC crackdown that no more than 4 or 5, probably 5 or 6, probably can play in an 11. And I could, and I've confirmed with a lot of sources as well, despite Harun Lorgat being at the helm, there were like probably 30 to 40 international players in that, more than 30 to 40 international players that were contracted in the NCL. And most of them did not have an O1 valid visa, which again cost like $25 to $30,000. And they saved up $300 to $400,000 just like that by calling players and asking them to play on a tourist visa. And there was real danger of these players being deported back and blacklisted from the US. So,
Okay, so a couple of questions here. First one to you, of course, Smith. Like you mentioned, you gave an example of the players who were not happy in terms of the kind of conditions that were on offer, despite the fact that there were big wigs involved and big names involved, this and that, etc., etc. But was it sanctioned by the ICC? Was it following the ICC mandate? Was it following the ICC rules? Do you have any information in terms of the players being concerned? As you mentioned, that it could impact their visas, the playing conditions were below par. Do you have any information in terms of the players' concern of participating in such tournaments or participating in such leagues?
no, I don't think the players are concerned at all, right? Because you come to the US through immigration, right? The immigration officer would ask you, why are you here? And if they're on a tourist visa, I don't think so they'd be talking that I've come here to play in a professional league. So the players, some of the top names in world cricket have lied probably at the immigration, and just raked in that $150,000 or $130,000 for a 9-day or a 10-day T10 tournament. It was just easy money. It's just quick buck. So I don't think so. Players knew what they were into. Players knew what they were doing.
Okay, that's a massive statement, George. Sorry, Jared. I want to bring you in here in terms of, yes, the players want to, make good on the amount of playing time they have. It's a restricted shelf life. Not everybody is going to be an international superstar, a David Warner or an Andre Russell who's plying his wares in the top leagues, etc. So anywhere and everywhere they would want to go and get that fast buck. But where do you draw a line in this? Where does the ethics and legality come into it, and what is the role of the FICA in this? I mean, the Players Federation, which is uh, which prides itself in saying that they try and govern the factors where cricketers can be involved or can't be involved. Where do they step in here?
Well, they can't stop any players from taking any of those kinds of deals, right? So they're a union. They advise, and that's where they finish. Also, as important an organization as it is in cricket, it doesn't have 100% membership, right? Not all cricket nations are actually involved, and the most important one is not involved in India, which is part of the reason why it's that, Indian players are still massively underpaid. Considering how much the IPL and BCCI make, Indian players should still be paid 5 to 10 times more money than they're currently paid at the moment. So that's why unions matter. But unions can't stop anyone from doing this. I mean, the sort of thing that Smith is talking about has been going on in American cricket for a long time. The difference now is that there's a bit more money involved. But in the old days, the West Indian cricketers would go over on whatever visas they had available to them, and they'd make $20,000 for a weekend to play that. Me and George are aware of Legends players doing similar sorts of things and going over to various countries and playing in those Legends leagues, quite often getting their pay in the hotel room in cash, which is always a good sign. If your employer is...
Or hotel room in kind. Sorry to interject.
Yeah. So if someone's giving you, a paper envelope with $10,000 in it, it's always a good sign that the business is very well run and is above board. I found, people like George with their Cayman Island accounts, they don't have to worry about stuff like that. But for the rest of us, so players will take the money. right? And that's what it comes down to. I think there might have been an English player who got in trouble for coming back into the country with too much cash a couple of years ago from one of these kind of payments, and that was from a major league. I don't think that was from one of the smaller leagues either. So players are going to do that. The problem is that there is no adult in the room. Right. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about the leagues or what Smith is talking about, where there's no governance at all. There is no governance of any of these leagues. FICA is not in charge of any of these leagues. The ICC is not in charge of any of these leagues. So who's the adult that comes in and says, guys, you cannot do this anymore? The only person who would do that would be individual boards. And they don't. They just turn their back on it. Sorry,
just on that. I mean, the ICC do sanction leagues or occasionally even declined to sanction leagues, and they did sanction, I believe, the Major League Cricket this year. Now, whether they should have done is another question, but they hadn't done the year before, which is why no English players were getting NOCs, but they did this year. Now, there should be some scrutiny on why they are sanctioning it. What are the grounds? What criteria have to be satisfied? Because if it is of a standard where you're playing on park pitches, which sounds to be what occurred at times, and if there's not if the standard isn't such, then that has to go to the ICC as much as it goes to the local organisers. And so the ICC, as ever, with almost every issue in global cricket, need to be more effective, need to be stronger. But to do that, the governing bodies have to allow them to.
Okay, a couple of questions.
I'd like to come in on that MLC bit. George, for the MLC, so they are not taking a top to down approach. The MLC is taking the bottom to top approach in terms of not just spreading the word about the game over here in America, but also in terms of infrastructure. So just to put things in perspective of what MLC is up to over here, and the minor league as well, which underpins the major league. It's a minor league is a 26 team franchise tournament, just on the lines of our Syed Mushtaq Ali and the IPL. It's that sort of a structure. But apart from that, so just to put things in perspective, from 1965 to 2015 until USACA's demise, the erstwhile USA Cricket Association, they had 0 tough pitches under their ambit. Right? 0. 50 years, 0 tough wickets, 0 tough wicket grounds. Ever since the advent of the MLC and its parent company ACE, since 2018 or 2019-ish, it has like 15 to 16 tough wicket grounds under its ambit. And probably it governs more than 10 to 15, more than 15 to 20 cricket academies at the grassroots as well. So there is a clamor from the bottom, that is building up to be minor league, and then it's taking the shape of major league at the top as well. So this is how the US US cricketing structure and infrastructure looks like in today's world.
Okay,
and it's just worth adding there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just worth adding there that Major League Cricket isn't really the issue here. That's just another league that may or may not be successful. It's the 8 other leagues who get sanctioning really, really easily in America. And me and Smith have both looked into this. There's no reason for these leagues to exist. They shouldn't be sanctioned, and players shouldn't be playing in them.
In fact, I was about to bring you in on this because that's my underlying question, which I've been trying to ask here. That look, the MLC, the major league and the minor league, it's been established in the way that Smith has described, and of course, there's a lot of money that's involved there, a lot of investment that's been involved there, a lot of planning and execution that's been involved there. Like Jared said, it might succeed, it may not succeed, and that's something that time will tell. But it's the other leagues that are mushrooming around it, the lack of governance around that's probably going to impact something like the minor league or the major league eventually, if it's not at present. And that should be of concern. Let's bring in Srini here, and then I'll get thoughts from George and Jared and Smith on that same thing. Srini.
This so-called concern that we are talking about, in terms of, these leagues sprouting around the world, one needs to be, careful about, one needs to understand the fact that as long as the league is reflecting a decent business model, which kind of, helps you get an understanding of where they intend to, earn the revenues from going forward. Maybe not overnight, but going forward, as long as that is happening, I'm willing to give a league a chance. I'll give you an example. We were talking about MLC, right? Like anybody else, when the MLC was launching, or when I first had the idea of Major League Cricket, like anyone else in the market, I also was a bit skeptical in terms of, oh, there goes another league. I'd like to understand after this from Smith in terms of, when we talk about a league like NCL, what time of the day are these matches being held in America? And I'll give you a reason why. Because I thought, at the start of when the MLC was first being talked about, I said there goes another league which is going to be played at 10 o'clock in the morning in the US time, so as to cater to the subcontinent prime time in India, so that it can be, kind of viewers can catch it live at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening. What surprised me, and pleasantly so, was when MLC took that call that they were not interested in the subcontinent prime time. They were not looking to run a league that was catering to Indian viewers, which is what is happening, which I will kind of get on to as I take this forward. So what they said was that we are willing to do this. We are primarily build an American product, and we are willing to kind of invest the next decade into this from a grassroots perspective. And we don't really care about where our revenues are coming from, where the television is concerned. As a start of this discussion, we discussed America, a great destination. Yes, there are markets, where you can look at revenues from outside the broadcast. That's where they took a call. And I think the onus on preparing some kind of a grassroots sustenance, I think that was a major decision on part of MLC in terms of how they announce themselves. Completely in contrast to MLC is, let's say, the ILT20 league, where in UAE there is no domestic cricket, so it's
You need
literally
more
kind
players. You need more international players there. Yeah.
Yes, but then they had their own model, which is, kind of setting up of Dubai. The setting up of Dubai has happened in the middle of a desert where there was nothing, and where, the rulers of the UAE put in place one of the world's greatest tourist destination, right? The setting up of ILT20 was akin to the setting up of Dubai, where they said, yeah, I mean, many of the things that they envisaged did not go the way that they had perceived, but what they wanted was, a travel destination to have cricket as one of the catalysts that could, attract crowds from the Indian subcontinent, is where the initial idea was based out of. Now, yes, please tell me. You saying
Yeah.
something?
Yeah. But I think in terms of going back to what's happening in the US, it's very different, as you established. It's
No,
very different. But
I'm just kind of, laying down the fact that every country, every cricket board, has had some sort of a mind going into, what they were aiming at. The question is, some have worked, some haven't.
yeah.
Some over a period of time have proved to be faulty ideas. Some over a period of time have shown potential. What is that one common thing which kind of, connects all these business models? The one common theme that connects all these business models is the revenue patterns. Very few leagues have managed to crack it. See, look at Cricket Australia. Okay, I can tell you for a fact that every 2 months, every 3 months, investors from India go and meet Cricket Australia, the board. Every 3 months they have lunch with them, they have dinner with them, they talk about investment there, they talk about opportunities where they can probably, invest in Big Bash, privatize it, have their cup of tea there and come back home. Cricket Australia has refused to budge. They are okay with what they're doing, and they don't want to look at the privatization model. They obviously foresee certain changes, whereas England Cricket Board has agreed to the privatization model. Now they are skeptical about it. They're skeptical about who the owners are going to be. So I'm just, kind of, I'll quickly take you through this. What connects all these dots is the revenue pattern. Anybody who's getting into this space and has a revenue model carved out knows where to head. The problem with most of these leagues is the revenue model hasn't been carved out. And the moment you don't have a revenue model in place, you certainly don't know where you're going to head. And that, I think, is the biggest problem. Now, when ICC has been sanctioning these leagues, here is where my worry stems from. My worry stems from the fact that what is the ICC doing? We talk about, how well is the ICC monitoring this? What has the ICC been doing in terms of trying to understand how exactly is the business model going to fall in place? Should we approve or should we sanction a particular league? And I think that is a place where ICC has paid zero attention to, and that, I think, has kind of gone on to
Wait,
become a bigger match.
yeah, you made quite a few points, so I have to circle back one by one. Well, let's bring in Smith first in terms of you try to establish what the NCL was trying to do in terms of its timing, in terms of its broadcast. Smith, do you have something for us on that bit and how it could potentially worry the likes of MLC, or does it even worry the likes of MLC as to when these kind of leaks just prop up out of nowhere?
As I mentioned before, MLC and the minor league are trying to take the bottom to top approach, and they're infusing a lot of money into the grassroots.
Okay.
Now they have, if I'm not wrong, they do have an exclusivity contract with USA Cricket, not to allow a league which has more than 6 to 7 broadcast cameras. Just to maintain that sanctity of their contract, just to maintain that sanctity of the designation that they're the strategic partners of USA Cricket. So I believe that by just sanctioning these sort of leagues, these fly-by-night affair leagues, the USA Cricket is quite dubiously not honoring that contract, and it's a blow to these guys, right? Who are trying to do the things the right way, and but I see where I see what's going on as well. NCL paid USA Cricket a staggering. I mean, it's staggering for USA Cricket around $200,000 sanctioning fees. Now,
Okay.
USA Cricket gets 1.2 million in ICC grants, which is of course their the lion's share of their gross receipts basically, and and I told you like 7 to 8 sort of leagues, right, and 200,000, 250,000 per league that's going to be the sanctioning money. So it's close to $1 million over there as well, which is exactly kind of what they're getting from the ICC. So and it's and trust me, it's a cash strapped board, right? So whatever low hanging fruits they're getting, they'll go for it basically. And I want to give you a lot of another instance as well of how murky things are over here. So there is this guy who shares the same last name as me and has a lot of of course I wouldn't name the guy because people in the US throw lawsuits for breakfast left and right. So without naming the guy, he still owns a couple, not a couple, but 3 to 4 T10 franchises around the world as we speak today as well. And they did have a team in the Sri Lankan T10. Probably it was in Jan or Feb, and I think there was this Times of India report, if I'm not wrong, where a fixing approach was made, and I think probably they didn't name the player, but according to my sources, they asked Upul Tharanga in person directly. I think he was he was its chief selector of Sri Lanka cricket back then, if I'm not wrong, or one of the selectors. And that particular person who belongs to the US, he was or is still under house arrest in Sri Lanka. So,
Okay.
over here as well, he used to be a minor league owner at one point of time. So,
Okay. So basically, what Smith is highlighting in terms of these different tournaments just ballooning up, just growing out or mushrooming in one place at the same time, where the structure is not in place. So it's an issue of governance. It's an issue of where you can get your revenue, you get it. Where you can get your money, you get it. Whether it's the players, whether it's the boards, whether it's the cricket association. Let's get to the other point. I mean, Smith has highlighted a couple of very interesting things, which will be in our video on demand, as we call them. But Srini also made another point in terms of the revenue and how the IPL teams or the franchisees are entering different markets, and US is another example of that. But now, and this is where I would like to bring in George in terms of revenue. Uh, of course, the ECB is very, very different from somebody like a USA cricket board, or even if there is a proper USA cricket board. But George, when you compare it with somebody like a Cricket Australia, who trying to rebuff these approaches, from the IPL franchisees or the IPL owners, the ECB might just be welcoming them to the 100. And then how do you look forward to that? Is it a matter of saying, because the T20 domestic competition, I think the Vitality Blast, if I'm not mistaken, um, that also allows for the counties to bring in the foreign players. I think it's two per 11 playing 11, but then the 100 is a totally different model, right? So
Yeah.
you have two parallel competitions running. The ECB, in a way, if we say it, double dipping into revenues. How does that
Well,
balance?
there isn't a lot of evidence that they're double dipping. It's more that they're halving. Genuinely, the evidence so far is that they've just cannibalized their market.
Yeah,
Just to go back a bit, when some of these leagues were set up, it wasn't actually with the primary intention of making quick money from broadcast deals. If you look at the early days of the Big Bash, which was terribly good in its early days, and correct
yeah,
me if I'm wrong, Jared, in particular, it was actually just designed to appeal to a new audience. Similarly, is what they told us about the 100, but it was designed to make sure that the next generation of people in Australia still loved cricket.
I mean, kind of. It was basically there because when what happened in 2007-8 when India was going to go home, they were terrified that they would have a breakdown with India, so they needed a constant stream of revenue. But you're right; they then pitched it specifically to a new audience who weren't coming to cricket games anymore.
And it did lose money for quite a long time, but I would argue that it was a successful calamity in that respect, because although it lost money, long term it was an investment. Now, the 100 is interesting because initially they told us that it was designed to do the same thing, to attract a new audience to the game, and now they're selling it. And you're right, they are desperate to sell it to IPL owners because there's a huge amount of money there. It's interesting, though, just on that, the IPL owners and the BCCI are not necessarily on the same page here. The IPL owners might well want to be playing their Indian team players at several competitions throughout the year, and the BCCI is still saying no to that. There's an area of conflict there. So again, going back to what Srini said, law of the jungle. It's not just league v board. It's league v league, board v board, board v league, individual teams in franchises against the board. Absolutely everyone for themselves. And this is where, as a governing body, admitting that they have a terribly difficult job, they've utterly failed. Now, in terms of just answering your question, yes, IPL owners are going to bid and are bidding, have bid already on the 100 sides. There have been bids from, expressions of interest, non-binding bids were at that stage from around 100 people. I mean, I could tell you some of them are, but you can imagine some of the IPL teams have expressed an interest in all 8 of the sides that are available. While part of me still wants the bloody thing to fail, those days have gone, and the world moves on, and they are going to sell. And they, you would have to say that in the short term, they're going to bring in quite a lot of money. The only people who are succeeding here, and good luck to them, are the players. The players will make money from every argument, every bit of competition, and that's fine. They probably deserve it. They're not doing anything wrong, not criticizing them. But when the Saudi Arabians decided a few months ago or a year or two ago that they would like to take on the IPL, the only people that would have benefited that are the top players. If they had offered, say, Virat 100 million a year, silly sums you might think, but we're going that way. The only people who would benefit is Virat because the BCI would have offered him 110 million. And while those figures are ridiculous, that's the way we're going. And what happened there, by the way, is Saudi Arabia and the BCCI, I believe, have decided to work together. Just on the point that Jared made, I think that the IPL teams are paying under 15% of their income on player salaries at the moment. So there's a huge more to come.
Srini and Jared, do you want to add to that? I mean, Srini, how long is this? Because George, added to it that as long as the IPL teams are going to stay interested in buying, or the IPL franchises, they're going to be interested in trying to buy more teams in different leagues, and we're headed that way, aren't we? They have leagues in South Africa, in ILT20, which are running in parallel, MLC. Then you have the 100, which has been in talks. As long as that keeps happening, And why we have this graphic up is where Kevin Peterson, who's been part of these leagues, and he's put up the idea of a super club. First of all, will we ever see? We'll come to the fact of the BCCI and the Saudi Arabia thing, but will we ever see the Indian cricketers come out of the IPL, come out of the ambit of the BCCI, and be participating part of the super club structure where somebody like an MI or a Mumbai Indians, for example, just an example, owns 7, 8 teams, different teams, and that player is playing for that particular team?
Okay, too many things. So I'll try and kind of break it whenever I can. First of all, George mentioned that the BCCI and the franchisees are clearly not on the same page, right? The BCCI doesn't have a page at all. The BCCI absolutely lacks that page. As in, the franchisees at least have some perspective. I don't see the BCCI carrying any sort of perspective. The BCCI was carrying a perspective 15 years ago. Had the man who was writing that perspective, Lalit, we were talking about the show before the show started, we were talking about Lalit. Had Lalit been around here, what Kevin is saying would have happened 5 years ago, 8 years ago. The perishing of international cricket would have already happened by now. We wouldn't have been discussing the idea of bilateral cricket at all. We would have moved on from the idea of bilateral cricket a long, long time ago. The thing is that BCCI has been in a passive mode, caught up with other things. I also see a lack of perspective on part of BCCI. And until the next game changer from India comes over and tries to do things differently, this is going to kind of, keep falling short. Now, quickly going away to, the role of the franchisees.
No, just to interject here. You're talking about the game changer. I believe personally that the game changer is already here, where the IPL franchises themselves own different teams, different leagues.
I'm coming to the IPL franchises. That's what I'm coming to the franchises. Franchises. You talk about franchises. What sets apart the IPL franchises? Why are we not discussing any other team owners here? But the IPL franchises. The point is they have a sustainable revenue model going for them. Now, take the case of England Cricket Board and the 100. The England Cricket Board wants private investors to come in. However, internally, they've given the mandate to a couple of bankers. And in India, they've given the mandate to the Rain Group, which is, again, a financial, a private equity arm. And they've said, internally, the England Cricket Board has said that we don't want more than 4 IPL franchise owners in the 100. Okay, they have set this mandate internally, informally. Why? Because they think that more the IPL franchisees, the more they will come in and begin to dictate terms. So they have set the benchmark. They've set the bar at 4 franchisees, not more. In doing so, what have they done? Indirectly, they have cut off the idea of more IPL franchisees guaranteeing adequate revenues to the idea of 100 going forward. Why? Because the IPL franchisees are riding on sustained business models. For example, through the broadcast revenue, which is a 50-50 divide between the BCCI and the franchisees, there is a certain guaranteed amount of revenue that the franchisees are taking away home every year. And they have that kind of money to go and invest. Where are the returns? Anybody who's going to come in and invest in your league, where are they looking at these returns from? This is what I've been saying from the start of this conversation, that the moment you don't have a sustainable return from the investment that you're making into these leagues, whichever league, whether it's IPL or the 100, any league anywhere in the world, point is, as long as you're not looking at a sustainable return, you are going to look at other mediums to earn those revenue back, and that is where things are beginning to fall apart or beginning to look suspicious, or whichever way you want to look at it. Point is, as long as you have a sustainable business model, and that can only come through investments which guarantee you some kind of return.
Okay,
that
George,
is not happening. That is not happening, and in there lies all the mess what Kevin is talking about. And as we go further,
which spills over, really. Okay, George, before I move on from this topic, couple of questions on what Srini has said. Can you really restrict the number of IPL owners entering into the 100? Because we've seen the counties have already been fighting for their share of the pie. Can you really do that and say, okay, only 4 teams will be governed by the IPL owners? And B, as Srini says, where is the revenue coming from for the 100? Because if they are moving it ahead of the T20 tournament, and let me just add, I've been on a couple of tours to the UK. I've been fortunate enough to witness some T20 action in the Blast. I thought it was a fabulous competition. They should have grown it in the franchisee model, the way they have done it with 100, but they decided to start another format. So again, 2-point question: can they restrict the entry of IPL owners into the 100 to a limited number? And B, if they keep on with the 100, where is the revenue coming from?
Yeah, well, they probably can, but who knows? That a lawyer will argue that, no doubt. But it depends broadly, doesn't it, on what the other offers are? But we know there are offers from elsewhere in the world. Not very many from America, but there are some. We know there are offers from owners in Pakistan. There are other options out there. Whether it ends up being 4 or 5 in due course, we'll see, because there might be more teams. I completely agree with you about the wasted opportunity of the Blast. I thought the English cricket had a unique selling point, which was promotion and relegation. I think they've wasted that. The problem is it's going to look the same as every other tournament. It's going to be the same players. And you've got a problem with cricket becoming wallpaper. I'm not that enthusiastic about this. It's brilliant for players. There are good things about it in that there's cricket on TV all the time, but it's not on the same channel, so you've got to pay various subscriptions. And I'm not sure it has a great deal of meaning, but maybe I am just old and out of touch.
Definitely, that's true.
Okay, time to bring Jared in. He touched on this thing about same players. We let's shift towards what it means for the players. Look at this graphic here. Number 5, a separate governing body has to be set up to govern this. Before we bring in the players and their perspective, Jared and Smith, I would like your thoughts on this. Do you really think, in the present landscape that we have right now, because Smith mentioned those points, that the ICC has some rules pertaining to these leagues, how they should be set up, which were not followed with the NCL. Jared, do you really think that we need a separate governing body for running these leagues in parallel? I mean,
we need a governing body.
Sorry?
These leagues don't. We need a governing body. These leagues don't have any governing body at the moment. So what you're talking about?
Do we need a parallel governing body?
Yeah, it's not parallel, Chetan. It's not parallel. There is no governing body for these leagues. These leagues exist on their own. The only leagues that need to get these clearances, these sanctions, are people like America and Malaysia and Kuwait and Oman. You do not need to get the ICC's clearance to run a league in a test-playing nation, right? If the ECB wanted to put 4 more leagues in tomorrow, they could, right? If they wanted I don't know, under a roof in January league in the UK, they could do that. So there is no one governing T20 cricket at the moment. And it's really important to note that. It's a little bit different when you go down to the associate countries and they have to ask for permission to have these leagues sanctioned. But at the top level, if the West Indies wanted 4 more leagues tomorrow, they could. Why do you think there are so many leagues popping up in the West Indies at the moment? There's T10 leagues, there's women's leagues, there's now this Guyana, Exxon Valdez Spill Oil League or whatever it's called. We have leagues popping up all over the place. So there is no one in charge of that. So it's not a case of having a separate governing body, which is, I think, what a lot of people think is needed. We need an actual governing body to look after these things. And the reason we don't have it, and I can promise you, and KSR and probably George know this as well, is when the ICC went to the major boards and said, do you mind if we start to organize this? This is getting a bit all out of control. All the boards went, no, you can't tell us whether we can have a league in our own backyard or not. Who do you think you are? You don't really run cricket anyway. All you do is provide the umpires. So we have no structure over these leagues. So we need some structure, whether it's separate or the ICC. That doesn't bother me. There just needs to be something.
Okay, and I think I know what you're talking about, because in terms of when the Champions League T20 was set up, it was 50% BCCI, if I'm not mistaken, 25% ECB, 25% Cricket Australia. It was that kind of a structure which would govern that particular tournament. And at that particular time, I also thought that was an opportunity lost in terms of where you could have a starting point to maybe have some sort of governing structure in place for these T20 leagues. I mean, let's get everybody's thoughts on this. Srini, then George, and then Smith as well. Are we way past that point that we can actually put a governing structure in place for these leagues? Srini, let's start with you. You're muted.
Listen, see what's already been done. You're not. It's not like you can wish it away. It's there, and you can't just say, okay, from tomorrow, what you do is just disappear. That's not going to happen, right? You have allowed these leagues to kind of, set foot, kind of. You've given them a window, you've given them the necessary approvals. Now you just can't say that, you have to give them the necessary time to allow them to perish on their own by way of not being able to sustain. That's the only way out now. What you can do is going further, what Jared just mentioned, the importance of, or there being no governing bodies in place at all. You can probably put in filters in terms of, what needs to be done before the sanctioning of these leagues. Now, what is common to any league that is probably making a lot of noise for all the wrong reasons, or is not successful, or is not really looking at a future? The bottom line to all such leagues is absolutely failed governance. You talk about BCCI, you talk about the 100. In England, are you looking at 20 leagues sprouting all at the same time? No, you're not.
No.
In Australia, are you looking at any other property which is really giving Big Bash a run for its money? No, you're not looking at anything. In India, people have tried to do what they could against the BCCI, and we all know how disastrous they failed. Kind of.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about current international cricketers, not Legends League and not some random league for retired cricketers. I'm talking about leagues that involve current cricketers. The only solution to this is the only solution. I'll just complete this. The only solution to this is to kind of make cricket boards answerable, and that's where the ICC has to filter this in. But then the ICC has been.
The ICC is a committee in itself, isn't it? I mean, George, is this even possible for the ICC to say, okay, we're going to govern something which is private to you, which is your own private and entrepreneurial venture?
Yeah, but they can do more. Of course they can, and they probably will once there's a new chair, starting imminently. And I suspect he will feel empowered. I suspect we'll have a new chief executive very shortly as well. So I think there is scope to be, you're not trying to inhibit opportunity, and you're not trying to in any way thwart or refute the idea that the game has changed, and it's changed forever, and it's changing quite quickly. Those things are fine up to a point, but you can still have some regulation. You have to have regulation around integrity and safety and issues like this, and I don't think we're even there yet. It really is the Wild West.
And just to put one of the FICA a couple of years ago released something about how often players don't get paid from these leagues, and quite often you eventually get paid. But I know IPL players who still haven't been paid by their franchises and never will. Right. I know coaches and analysts and physios who have never been paid by franchises, major franchises all around the world, and they never will. There's a lot of leagues where a lot of owners come in and say they've got money and they don't have any money, and the league then has to scramble to try and get the money. Right. That's what we're talking about. We're not saying that Malaysia can't have a great T20 league. The Hong Kong, was it called the Hong Kong Blitz before this, before they brought the Sixers back, was a great little tournament, but it knew what it was. It had a great little revenue pattern, and it made sense within Hong Kong. Most of these other leagues, as I said at the start, do not make sense. There is no reason for it to exist. No one is watching it. No one is turning up to the ground, and there is no way for it to make money, which makes it susceptible to all the stuff that George just said. Various different forms of, bad practice or just out and out corruption.
And the players and agents need to remember that if you have the freedom of movement, which you must have, and the freedom to earn, and the leagues have the freedom to make money and succeed, they also have the freedom to fail. And that will happen. That is inevitable. We've seen leagues fail already, haven't we? But the competition is such that, there's growth. Okay, we can talk about growth. That's brilliant. We'd like to see that happen. But a lot of those things were happening anyway, with the Olympics and other initiatives, which maybe were a bit better governed. I don't know. But, just remember, some of these will fail. We're not at the end yet. I said at the start.
We're somewhere stuck in the middle point. You mentioned the Olympics, George. Just want to bring in Smith here because we've been talking about governance. Before we just have a final conversation on what it means for the players in terms of double dipping, in terms of agents moving their players around. Smith, I mean, when you have a lack of governance, when you have so many leaks popping up, like you mentioned, mushrooming, not decent infra, etc., etc., do you see a danger in terms of cricket's involvement in the Olympics? A lack of governance from cricket's own body, not just having a stronghold over any kind of structure really, and then we have the Olympics coming on. Is there a correlation there? Is there a potential correlation there? Could it impact cricket's introduction in the Olympics?
So I can reliably tell you that the USOPC, the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, has doubled down on its efforts to get some healthy governance going from USA Cricket,
Okay.
and I can tell you that USA Cricket might be in real danger of being scrapped as the NGB, as the national governing body, if they don't adhere not just to ICC's guidelines, but also the USOPC's guidelines in terms of some of the points in their constitution, which I am being told that they're in the middle of adopting it officially. But again, if the USA Cricket doesn't comply to some of the salient points that have been raised by the USOPC, we might well see a dogfight over here in the US, where there are currently two or three contenders to stake claim as the national governing body. Like, imagine being kicked. Imagine BCCI being kicked away and someone else coming into at the fore, right? And it's normal over here in the US. But again, I'll tell you an instance what's going on and why it is really, really, really pressing to have that some sort of league governance going at the world level. There is this tournament happening in December. It's called the US Open, and Jared might know, the benefactor of the tournament. It's his name is Mac. His name is Mac Qureshi, and he is a bankrupt guy, an erstwhile millionaire, and he has been having this tournament since the past 15 years, where Muthaiya Muralidharan, Sanat Jayasuriya, and you name it, right? Apart from a few Indian cricketers, the who's who of world cricket, of who's who of Asian cricket, let me put it like that, have graced his tournament, and he is currently having his trials in Karachi right now.
Okay.
He is having his trials in Karachi right now for a tournament that's going to happen in December. A youth, probably not a youth, but a tournament in the US where trials are being held in Karachi. So who's going to give an oversight on the immigration racket, right? It's so
Basically, yeah.
easy. Let me tell you something. It is so very easy to get an O1 green card visa if you've played first class cricket anywhere in the world. So
Again, that's again. So the important point here that I want to make is okay.
And one more important
Maybe
point, if I
established.
could interject, it's the inertia of the BCCI, the absence of a BCCI deep state, with respect to ICC being toothless. And I think the BCCI deep state needs to get its
Get involved with
into action to counter the clout of these leagues as well.
Okay, just a final question in terms of that. You mentioned about the governing body in the US and etc. Does it jeopardize cricket's participation in Olympics with everything that's going on in the US?
As of now, yes, but it has nothing to do with the governance of the T20 leagues or the T10 leagues or the misgovernance on the USA Cricket's part. But it's their internal kerfuffle, that's always going on regarding governance and some of the internal things that are basically pricking the USOPC. That has nothing to do with what we are discussing.
US is definitely in terms of whether the leagues, whether the governance, whether even visas. I mean, we can't really govern the visas, but that's clearly a market space that needs to be kept under check or kept under regulation of some sort. So hopefully, as you mentioned, somebody will be keeping an eye on that. As George mentioned, there's going to be changes at the ICC. Maybe that will ring in it. Just last couple of minutes in our discussion today, and this is a topic that I really want to touch in terms of all of this: the shrinking space, the overlapping, the double dipping that we've used the term. What does it imply for? Does it imply for the players? And I want to bring different topics to you, each of you, in terms of players benefiting and obviously some cons of it as well. For example, Srini, let's start with you. It's great for the players, isn't it? Uh, George and Jared mentioned that the IPL is still underpaying them. I know you've been an advocate of IPL paying its players more, paying the Indian superstars even more money. So that's great from a player perspective, that there is a lot of money, not just for the IPL, not just for the Indian players, but players across the world. If you're a cricketer across the world, there's a lot of money that you can be made at present.
Well, I mean, I am certainly of the view that the players' salaries in the IPL should go up, and kind of looking at the multifold increase that happened in the broadcast rights. The players' salaries have hardly increased, and you look at the some of the top leagues anywhere in the world where stakeholders in Indian cricket keep talking about how the IPL belongs to some of the belongs in the middle of somewhere of the some of the top leagues anywhere in the world. So if you looking at the NFL or looking at the NBA, the players' salaries just crash to the roof. And I think from that perspective, IPL needs to do a lot more on that front where salaries are concerned. Now, having said that, it is obviously an extremely good phase for cricketers. We were talking about Smith gave us so many examples of what's happening behind the scenes. I know for a fact that I won't name the league neither the player. The point is, there was a player recently I saw at the fag end of his career participating in a T20 league, a private T20 league, where he was least interested in playing the league. He came there to keep signing contracts with advertisers, sponsors, etc., etc. He knew it was his last season or two, and he just wanted to make a quick buck before he retires forever. So I understand that the players want to make a lot of money before they realize that it's sad. All of us, George, Jared, me, you, all of us at this stage, we are all at an age where we are looking to see where can we kind of take our careers to the next level from here. Whereas at the same age, at 35, 40, 45, 40, in the early 40s, a cricketer is thinking, what do I do next? He has to start rebuilding all over once again. So it's a sad phase. So if you look at it from a sports person's career perspective. Having said that, it's a great phase for cricketers. This is not about cricketers. This is not about cricket boards and how much they're paying these players. I think the whole discussion where kind of came up with, well, I think it all hinges on the word governance, on the term governance, and
Okay.
Jared talked about it, George talked about it, and I think the word governance has to play a mightier role than what it does, and I think it is weak governance that is leading to all the kinds of questions that we see around us and without answers, because kind of for the longest time we have known any successful sport to have been kind of given to us in a particular direction in the way it is headed. Like, for example, 15 years ago, a Lalit Modi came and told us that cricket can potentially change. He gave us a direction and he showed us how cricket can be monetized further and what is the direction it needs to take going into the future. Suddenly, somewhere down the line, it lost its way, and I don't think there is enough bandwidth among the current set of administrators to tell us from here where exactly next is the game should the game be going. And I'll end my say this line. We, as in Jared, George, Chetan, you, me, what are we doing? We are in the middle of documenting a transition. We really don't know. Our generation really doesn't know where cricket is going to settle down, in what shape, what form is cricket going to settle down. What we
Yeah.
essentially are doing is we are documenting a transition. Probably the generation after us or the generation after that will be able to determine the end game that we possibly are discussing today. Having said that, to do the right thing is what is important, and I think the ecosystem will benefit a lot if the individuals involved with the game at multiple levels just keep on doing the right thing.
George, is that the biggest con at the moment? Yes, it's great for the players. They're getting paid left, right, center, top, bottom, everywhere. Whichever direction they look at, they're getting paid, playing different leagues, maybe 3 leagues a month, etc., etc., become mercenaries. But at the same time, they get lost in the jungle. There's no recognizability. International cricket takes a backseat. And the current, I mean, these leagues, as you mentioned, they started off with the idea of bringing in the new audience, and that same audience perhaps doesn't even recognize these players because they are playing 2 matches, getting on a flight, playing some other tournament. So is that the biggest con of this current system then?
Is it a con? Interesting. I'm going to pull you up a little bit on the word mercenary, and you may not have meant it negatively, but I think it has negative connotations. And of course,
Okay.
there's no reason why they shouldn't be allowed to go. You know, they're not doing anything wrong by using the system to their benefit. It's a short career, as we all know, and the game has always changed. You know, you see, one of the reasons I'm somewhat reticent in giving you a strong opinion here is that the game has always changed, and it's always changing, and it comes through it, and it still ends up pretty bloody great. That's what history tells us. Now, I'm personally not sure that that's what's happening this time. It feels to me like the game is changing, and it's not getting better. You know, we're seeing a race to the bottom in international cricket. I genuinely think the standard of international cricket has deteriorated, particularly in Test cricket. I'm not positive it's good, but it may be that I'm out of time. Now, I don't have a vision for how the future is going to be. It seems to me that Lalit's idea was for mass market and commercialization, and that's brilliant. But the downside is, you know, if you have fast food everywhere, you've got lots of options, but how much of it is any damn good? And not a lot of it. So that's where I feel we are. I'm not massively optimistic about it, but then it wasn't for me. It wasn't, you know, I loved it in the past. So my own view is a bit negative. It feels to me like climate change. It feels like the waters rise around our ankles, and the future is pretty bloody grim. But I hope people are more optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, you just had to compare it with climate change, didn't you? Jared, bringing you in on this. I mean, look, the other side of it is in terms of governance, which both Srini and George alluded to. I mean, if the players are switching over one tournament to another, for example, I mean, there's this thing of if your team doesn't make the knockouts, your contract is null and void, and you go and play another tournament. And I've also spoken to a few cricketers, I'm sure you have as well, or support staff, etc., and so on. There's a lack of coherence, even as a franchise. If you're trying to build something, you're not really building anything, are you? You're just flying in players, and they're flying out after a couple of games, etc., etc. Just let me finish. For example, the idea of 100. For example, it just gets completely lost. Even if the ECB is trying to build something, a player like Andre Russell comes in, or Sunil Narine or Rashid Khan comes in, plays 2 games, and then flies off to play the MLC. I mean, that's not of an advantage to either the players or the franchisees or the audience or the governing body, to anybody really.
So my first day of working with a cricket team was in St. Lucia, and I arrived in Trinidad and was jet lagged and came in and sat down with a bunch of players and coaches, and they were like, the vast majority of the guys here don't care if we win or lose. And if we get to a point where we can't win the tournament, they're all going to just emotionally check out, right? That's what we have created. We've created a system where the cricketers no longer care if they win and lose, right? And you know, if you've ever spent time with professional cricketers, like all of us have on this chat, they are incredibly, they are driven and passionate people, and they are competitive as hell. And you have a conversation with a cricketer, and you tell them a story, and they try and top you with the next story straight away, right? Like that's how they are bred. And if we have created a system where they don't even care if they win the next game, what are we doing, right?
Yep.
Now
That's a broken
to go.
code.
Yeah, and to go against the Georgia's side of things, the other way of looking at this, of course, is that we now have a situation where young women can come through from pretty much anywhere in the world and actually make a career of cricket, which has never happened before. And freelance cricket is going to pay a lot more than international cricket is going to be if you're from Scotland, right? Or if you're from Mexico or the USA and you're good at cricket now, you have a chance of getting paid to play it. If you are from Thailand, if you are from Japan, all these different players, we've got, you know, an Italian player who might end up in the IPL, right? And we've got Italian players who've already been signed in other leagues. We've got Nepalese kids looking at YouTube videos and now have careers, right? It's hard to look at that and go completely in with George's idea of that the world is ending, because there are a lot of great cricketers here who are actually getting opportunities that never had them before because of the way the cricket was structured. It was structured in a racist way, in an elitist way, and in an with the empire way. We are breaking free of that. And we should be really excited by the fact that cricket can go to new places and do incredibly great things. But if the cricketers don't care about the games they are in, right, we are losing something, right?
Yeah.
If that there's the fundamental problem that we have with these leagues at the moment. If the cricketers don't care, why should we care? And that is what you were seeing in Georgia's lament, right? And that's what you're seeing with KSR say, we don't know what the future is. All we can sit here and document it, right? But at any stage, there is a league being played somewhere in the world where it doesn't make any sense that this thing exists. It's great for the players to make more money, and we all back that. But the other side of it is depressing as hell to listen to an international cricketer tell you they're not going to try in this game because they don't think it's worth it. And if they fail, they might be able to go to another league next week and make more money.
Just to jump in, just very quickly, I think that was the first did the first international cricket match involve the US? I think it did. And
USA, Canada.
Yeah, and the first
US versus Canada, I think.
Right, and the first
1844.
World Cup in '75 involved Canada and I think East Africa. I mean, there have been all these opportunities before. The game, equally, women's cricket was quite popular going back quite a long time. Our governing bodies or whatever have ruined these opportunities in the past. But, you know, Jared makes some really, really good points. But we're racing to get back to where we were 100 years ago or more. Bizarre.
You know, like I said, it's great you compared it with climate change, isn't it? I mean, it's there's some positives to look at, there's some negatives to look at, just to wind up everything.
Sometimes I also feel like if it's a generational issue, you know, as Jared mentioned, that players not being not putting in 100% or not caring about it. I can tell you that at the MLC, the overseas players have hit more golf balls than cricket balls. And Ricky Ponting has sent down more throwdowns than these guys have, smashed golf balls. So that's why I'm asking: is it like a generational thing that players actually not caring, and because because I can tell you what, Ricky Ponting was probably giving his 100% over here. He was giving throwdowns to Andrew Tai and Saurabh Netravalkar on the eve of the final for like an hour.
Yeah,
So,
but the difference is that if they bomb out early, Ricky Ponting isn't going to go to another tournament and get another paycheck. Whereas if that major league team goes out, those players are now on the market for, is there a CPL on? Is there a T10 league somewhere I can go and play in? Ricky Ponting can't suddenly stop coaching towards the end of a tournament. So the coaches quite often will tell you that they take it seriously, but they are noticing this trend. We can't deny that this is happening. This isn't a young person thing. This is, if you're a young professional cricketer now and there are two leagues playing at the same time, it is in your benefit to try and play in both of those leagues. And how on earth is that the best for cricket?
Okay, just to wind up this.
Or maybe it was, Chetan, just to add, well, maybe this was always around. This was always happening. It's just that the focus, thanks to, all the television and all the onus around the idea of T20 leagues that's sprouting around the world, maybe there's a lot more focus right now on international cricketers than it ever used to be. Maybe kind of the space has just opened up where I think the line has blurred between the idea of what an international cricketer from a test playing nation and the international cricketer from anywhere else around the world is concerned. So I think that line is blurring. Maybe
I can see all of you guys are very optimistic, and I like that optimism. Maybe except George, I think, who wants to take us 100 years back. Let's just wind up by, in short, we've just gone over time a bit, but let's just wind up in short. All of your opinions. How do you see this going forward? Where are we headed? If we can sum it up in 2 sentences each. Let's start with Keshanivas Rao.
As I said, we are in the middle of documenting a transition. There's no end game to this right now. You can't put a finger and say which way this is going to go. However, since you're asking this question, I'll say this, that where cricket suffers right now, the biggest suffering point is lack of bandwidth in the game. The administration. I don't see enough bandwidth in the game for the so-called administrators who sit at the governance of the sport, showing us a direction where the game should be headed. And that's where cricket lacks. And in that space, I'm extremely worried, and I really wouldn't want to kind of. But yeah, just because this comes to mind, I think Jared or George, someone mentioned the idea of a Scotland cricketer. Probably earning more through a franchise than what the board is paying. I'd like to take a punt here. I see the same future for an Indian cricketer going forward.
And I think that would make George happy. George, your thoughts?
Oh, it wouldn't particularly make me happy or not. I agree, completely agree that will happen at some stage. A player towards the end of their career will be offered a certain amount of money. I mean, Virat is in that golden spot now, isn't he? He's hugely marketable. But and if he threatened to do it, the BCCI would find more money for him. So I mean, as I say, look, as I've said, there is no logic in being negative. You have to embrace it. The world always changes, and cricket's still a brilliant game over whichever format it's played, and that is a huge asset. So there'll still be lots of fun ahead. But the world is changing, and some of the things we're losing, I will miss.
Okay, Smith, for an emerging market, things going to be a lot more positive, a lot more optimistic.
We're like caught in we're like caught in double bind over here. Over here, at some point, on one hand, there is a chance to democratize the game. I can tell you that a Harmeet Singh or an Andreas House is probably making more money than a Mehdi Hassan Miraz. So there is a chance to democratize the game in like no way than ever before. But then you have to have that eagle eye on the proceedings as well.
Okay, Jaron Kimber with the last word, as always.
I think we are in a position where we can grow the game like we never have before. And so I don't think we have to just look at this as something that's lost. I think if you ask most people when music was at its best, they will tell you between the age of 12 and 25 when they were around. And there is a real argument and a real worry that we can do that. We can get a little bit caught up in this sort of stuff. I watch cricket in so many different places around the world. And I see so many new people coming towards the game. I think it's nothing but good. However, cricket has always stumbled because no one has ever actually looked after it and tried to grow the game and administrate it and just care for it correctly. So it's going to bumble around and bump into things. But if you look at the history of cricket, that's what it's always done. It's a popular game. It is growing. I think there are lots of positives here, but we have to make sure that all the people who are involved are getting the most out of it. And at the moment, I don't think that's the case.
And hopefully somebody will look after it. Somebody will care for it. As Jared said, that nobody's really done that. And I think that is the biggest hope with which we can end this episode. Thank you, gentlemen. It's been educational. It's been entertaining. It's been really fun having you on board. Hopefully we can do it more. Thanks to Jared Kimber, Smith Patel, George Dovell, and K. Srinivas Rao for joining us. We were discussing cricket's Hunger Games, cricket headed for league wars on player availability. What does the structure for cricket looks like going ahead? And I can tell you, it's a lot more positive than we initially thought. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on the show, for your precious time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.